they are, they already see that, and in seeing a gay community, they're very careful to say, in that second paragraph, that we have had letters of support from gay groups, and they name about 5 different states. So they are clearly seeing themselves as part of a community, and that's important, and part of a movement. On the right, can we get rid of that in the middle of the screen?
On yours.
Oh, I have to do it mine? Yeah. Sorry. On the right side of the screen is the agenda of this first meeting. And you can see they've at the bottom, I know it's hard to read, at the bottom are the topics of the various workshops that will run during the day. So content-wise, we can see that they've crafted a program, and in the opening remark, they've stated their mission and goals. But you have to look at the format side. I know it's hard to see a digital version, but these are clearly created on typewriters. Remember, this is 1974. There aren't computers. There is no archives of this first conference. The only reason we have these records are because they're in the paper of Steve Bull. And they didn't have the resources to have the program printed professionally. But over this 30 years, the name changes from the Maine Gay Symposium, a word gay that really refers to the male population. It changes and becomes more conclusive over time. So it finally becomes the Maine Gay Lesbian Bi Trans Symposium. And but at this point, this is the program from 1991 that I chose because this is when the symposium is happening at USM. But you can see they've progressed since that first program. It looks a little bit more professional. They've got graphics. It's got a pink cover. It's actually a folded program. They've come a little ways. And the community is now defining itself as not just gay, but it's gay, lesbian, bi, and transgender. And in fact, one of the things that Maine can be very proud of as they work towards state legislation of non-discrimination, they kept the trans people as part of that. Many of the states, in order to get through legislation protecting the rights of the queer community, left the trans out because that was the only way they could get the bills through their legislatures. Maine did not. So the community is defining itself, and but the important thing about these conferences is they're statewide. So people are coming from all over the state, which means people can make connections, they can get to know each other. It's the way communities are built. And in fact, I've had people from the community come talk to me and say, you don't understand, Susie, which I didn't. It was the first, when going to this conference for 2 days, you could feel safe somewhere and you could talk to people openly about who you were and know that they understood. And it's not, it makes sense that these conferences happen at campuses of the UMaine system. Why? Because university campuses can control their space and they can be safe spaces. Next way you build a community is by communicating. And the way that happened in Maine was newspapers, which Susie will show you as soon as she finds it. Here we go. Oh, actually, I'm going to go back up a second. This is our digital commons where we mount digitalized versions of items in the collection. The cool thing about the digital commons is there's a map at the bottom. You see that little point? That's probably us. If we watch this map for a little while, we will see people using the collection in real time. Come on, people, start using the collection. It actually often things really, you have to take my word, things do pop up. Anyway, the newspapers. And there we go. I just want to scroll down this screen first. These are all separate titles. There's over, how many? 40, there are 40 in the collection. And we think we've got all of them. There's a couple that were in a collection which are being digitized right now, which haven't gone up yet. This is actually truly amazing to think about it. Again, we are pre-computer. So these are nonprofit volunteers who are gathering this news, writing the articles, formatting the newspaper and getting it printed. It takes my breath away every time I stop and think about it. But these are vital in a state like Maine, because you have it's a huge state with a sparse population. This is the only way to reach people, to have some kind of publication. And these start in 1974, coming out of that first gay symposium, and they all end around 2000. Can anybody guess why? What came into being around 2000? The internet. It was no longer, we didn't need to have a hard copy. You could distribute the news by putting something up on the internet. And there's actually only one that survives, and that's the Family Affair newsletter, which pretty much was always digital and was always on the internet. When you look at these, so if we look at the Maine Gay Task Force, and again, this is the newsletter that comes out of this conference, and what it's really doing is it's getting people to report. All the various groups around Maine are reporting into this newspaper what's going on, and they're then publishing that information. But if you look at the newspapers over time, the important thing about artifacts is to look at them both physically and intellectually, because the first one, I mean, this is pretty nifty. They've got themselves a header, but look, part of it is handwritten. But if you look at it again, this is most probably produced on a typewriter and a mimeograph machine. But it's impressive, several pages long. Over time, as we go on, they get fancier. They start introducing color, and eventually they get really fancy. And I'm going to show you this one because it has our interesting logo created, we think, down in Boston originally. I mean, they're having fun now. This rhinoceros with the wings, we think came out of Boston. The rhinoceros is because it's a sturdy, strong animal, but the wings give it that kind of otherworldliness. So even just looking at, if you don't even look at the content of the newspapers, you can see the community growing more sophisticated over time. And the reason we have digitized all these are full text. You can download them, you can read them online. This was the first group of material we digitized. And the reason was because they were the single group of material that had the most information, because you can go through these and find out what the community was doing when, and the community's reaction to events and other. And the importance is, if you're a gay person in the 1970s, the Bangor Daily News, the Portland Press Herald, they're not publishing news on the queer community because they don't give a damn. And they're certainly not reporting on what's going on in these various organizations, but these newspapers are. So they're helping people find connections, find groups, find events. probably the other important part of building community are social organizations. These are just some of them represented in separate collections. There are more scattered in personal papers of people, but they just span the world of social organization. The first one, Amkoshi, was a Jewish group, Jewish gay people. Casco Bay Men's was a kind of dinner club. Down East Pride Alliance was a business networking. The Gala Archives and the Gay Men Together were both summer camps. Gala was in Saco. Gay Men Together was at Pilgrim Lodge in Gardner. I have Gay Men Together twice. Apparently, I really like that group. Harbor Masters was a leather group. Gay Men's Chorus, the Rural Network, mainly Gay Archives was people, mainly men, and I don't know where they were.
They were at Pilgrim Lodge.
They were at Pilgrim Lodge?
And they weren't just a gay group, they were inclusive to all men of all orientations.
Thank you, and that is one of the things I also like about, I only know about Maine's LGBT community, so it may be true of others, but they really, having been pushed out of society, they were always very inclusive, more willing to gather people in than to say, no, you shouldn't be part of this. Some of the other groups that we don't have separate collections on, but they appear in other people's collections are the Matlovich Society, which was started in 1997, very early group that was dealing with education, holding talks, and they're named after the first American service member who outed himself. And the Chilton Mountain Club is another that ran outdoor hikes, etc. The one I want to end with is this Northern Land of Nord Archives. And they were, well, I'm going to let my film cell tell you about them.
The University of Southern Maine has a lot of interesting things in its LGBTQ collection, which is part of our special collections. One of the funnest ones is Gay Monopoly. Join us while we unbox this really neat game, but first, a little bit of background information from Susie, our archivist.
This 1983 edition of Gay Monopoly, which was done by Parker Sisters, part of Fire Iron Games, was owned by Northern Land of Nord, which was a social group based in Caribou, Maine. But Northern Land of Nord is very important to Maine gay history because of what they established. Their, let's say, audience was Northern Maine, which is quite rural, and into Canada. And to assist their audience, they established a gay hotline. But they established this just before AIDS hit. And so this gay hotline became the AIDS hotline for the state of Maine. So what started as a small social group, these people became powerhouses of raising money, applying for grants, and raising money to support this AIDS hotline for the state of Maine.
The instruction manual for the game features Ollie Gator, the main character. It also has a note in the back saying that eventually there will be a lesbian Monopoly. Unfortunately, as far as we know, one was never made. The board game is fairly similar to regular Monopoly, with a few gay twists. The same is true for the pieces. The money features historical gay men, like Frederick the Great, Julius Caesar, and Emperor Hadrian. The tokens also reflect different aspects of gay life. The captain's cap reflects the Leather and Levi community. The Jeep was a popular vehicle among gay men during this time. The hairdryer reflects the love of grooming as well as a bit of drag. The stiletto represents the drag community. The handcuffs are again a nod to the Leather and Levi community. And the bear could represent the femininity of some gay men or the bear community. The properties reflect prominent gayborhoods of the time period, like DuPont Circle, Christopher Street, Fire Island, as well as Providencetown. The utilities are spoofs on gay culture, and the railroads are discos. Instead of houses and hotels, you can buy bars to put on your properties, and later upgrade to bathhouses. Instead of chance and community chest, the board game features manipulation, family pride, and Ollie's sleaze bag. Manipulation teaches people about the hanky code. Depending on the color of the hanky and which pocket you put it in, it means different things. Family pride is also a teaching set of cards. In this case, it teaches about historical gay men. By flipping this over, you learn all about Harvey Milk. Ollie's sleaze bag cards are ones that you gain money by or move you around the board. In this case, you're told to go to the rest space. You can learn about this and lots of other items from special collections by going to the usm.maine.edu/libraries website and visiting special collections.
So what we've seen is the annual symposiums allowed for networking, the newspapers spread information on organizations, events, and issues, and the social groups encourage engagement, all creating a queer community. So we next turn to making themselves visible and educating the greater community. And the single greatest visibility maker was Portland Pride, which starts in 1987 with about 200 people. It eventually became Southern Maine Pride, and today is known as Pride Portland. This photograph. This is Betsy Parsons in the lead car. I think that might have been the year that, one of the years that she was the Grand Master. Betsy Parsons is a big leader, big figure. She did a lot with gay youth. And what's marvelous about Pride is, again, it celebrates all the groups. So Outright is a youth group. And what I love about the pictures is they capture the happiness. These people are proud and they're out there, and it's a celebration of life, and it's letting the rest of the world know to, in a point, as has been said, we're queer, we're here. And there are lots of others. But there's all sorts of artifacts that preserve the history of, and particularly pride. This is only one, but I particularly like this one. I like it because of the saying, courage to be ourselves, the playful but happy graphic. And I would look at this and say, somebody very carefully designed this. So there are resources here. T-shirts like buttons are wonderful because they are very easy and public way of promoting your values and your mission. And they hang around. So you can continue always to promote this. And our collection is littered with T-shirts. There's just a very few that are up right now, as well as we have a collection of Diane Elsie, where with I don't know, probably 50 to 60 buttons that she collected about the queer community and issues. And they're wonderful. They really give you a flavor of how people thought, and many of them are quite sarcastic, actually. Another important part of advertising and speaking out to the rest of the community is done through youth groups. And in Maine, there is a group in the Northeast called GLSEN, Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network. And one of the things GLSEN does is it promotes setting up GSTAs, which are gay, straight, trans alliances. They started as good being gay, straight alliances, and they expanded over time. Outright is the outgrowth of this, or excuse me, yes, Outright in Lewiston. And here this group in Lewiston, had a public forum to hear from the Governor's Commission on LGBTQ youth. One of the things many of these GSTAs do is they observe a day of silence, and they will go outside, stand, and it's the day of silence is to protest intolerance in schools. And the great thing about this is when you see young people doing it, I think the rest of society can feel proud and also realize that this is an important issue. The young people are going to be involved. The rest of us should get on board. So the last phase is political activism. All the social groups, the producing newspapers, the setting up of symposiums, have taught the community important skills. They know how to organize and they know how to communicate. So when Charlie Howard is killed in Bangor, July 7th, 1984, it sparked the movement. Does everybody know who Charlie Howard was? Okay. Charlie Howard was a very openly gay man in Bangor, and he was strolling down the street with a friend, I think it may have been his boyfriend, when a car with a couple of young men stopped, attacked them. His partner ran off. They picked up Charlie Howard and they threw him into the river, and he drowned. And as they were throwing him, he said, "Please don't, I can't swim." It's what started everything, because the following day, people gathered in the Unitarian Church on Congress Street, Portland. One of the guys who was there told me, I said, Susie, I can't express to you, and you won't understand because things are so different now. But to stand in that church with a sign, getting ready to go and walk out on the street, I was so scared. Charlie had just been killed, and to walk out on that street and identify yourself as gay and to stand up for yourself, it was frightening. But that's what people started doing. And the biggest thing that Charlie Howard's death did was it sparked the creation of the Maine Lesbian Gay Political Alliance, which you know today as Equality Maine. The goal of MLGPA and all of the other groups was to amend the Human Rights Act in Maine. And they started this in 1985 and working towards this work every year after that until 1997 when it was signed into law. And then there were 8 years of referendums that tried to overturn and reinstate it, overturn, reinstate it. And it wasn't finally until 2005 that it was signed into law. And that basically they were saying that the law ensured non-discrimination based on sexual orientation in employment, housing, public accommodation, which includes schools. So I'm going to start by first showing you the papers of Equality Maine. 4 manuscript collections. Instead of a catalog record, we have a finding aid. And this is how many collections we have processed so far. And this is by no means all of our collections. We have a lot to do. The records for Equality Maine, and in fact, this process, part of the collection is really, majority of it is when it's still Maine Lesbian Gay Political Alliance. But when it was given to us, these records were being held by what is now, what it had become, which was Equality Maine. But I just want to, so finding aid has a description, a history of the group, and a description of what's in the papers. And then a detailed box and folder list, going folder by folder, what's in the collection. I'm just gonna, this is how big this is. And as I said, these are mostly the records of when it's Maine Lesbian Gay Political Alliance. The rest of Equality Maine's records following this are still in boxes and unprocessed. We haven't gotten there yet. But aside from how large this collection is, which talks about the gigantic job these people did, the very end of it, in order to make sense of this long history of trying to get through this non-discrimination bill, the processor extracted the information from the collection, because this is what these people worked on, was passing this legislation. At the very end is and I'm going to go through, so these are listing of all the bills and what happened. It takes several pages just to list this, ending finally in 2005 with LD 1196, which was enacted and has not been overturned. So that's it in writing, but to see that graphic visually, we will again turn back to the Annette Dragon papers. And her photographs. So remember, this starts in 1997 is the first time the bill, no, not 1997, 1985 is the first time they try, I believe. By 1993, the bill passes both The bill is passed by both houses of the legislature and has gone up to the governor to decide, who has promised to sign it, and at the last minute he reneges. And this was a result. If you look at this photograph, analyze this photograph, both the words and the images, look at the faces of the people holding the sign. They are not happy. Look at this sign. These people are in a very public place. They're on the steps of the State House. And they've got a sign, and if you judge by looking at the sign next to the people, that's got to be about 4 feet wide and about 10 feet across. And the words on that were queer, don't fuck with us. These people are mad, and they're all bets are off. I actually have an image of this hanging in my office because I think this grabs. So this one picture tells so much of this story. And if also, I think it's interesting, look at some of the signs hanging before. You see the same language that came out of the African-American civil rights movements of the 60s. We shall be free, discrimination, it's the same language. And I think they are rooting themselves in that same tradition. So that's 93. 4 years later, 97, it makes it through both houses and the governor signs it. And again, this photograph was worth so much. First of all, the number of legislators that want to be in on this picture. And look at their faces, they're smiling, they're happy. And Dale McCormick, who was the founder of the Maine Lesbian Gay Political Alliance and later served as state treasurer, she just embodies that joy. In fact, this is such a moment for the community that there is in fact a t-shirt. Oops. I tried to, t-shirts there, I get a close up here. After 20 years, we won. They've got the date, the governor signs the Human Rights Act. And I think what's really important is what's on the back. Oops. What's on the back? Which says, thanks to Governor King, Senator Abramson, the Maine legislature, and Maine citizens for passing human rights for all Mainers, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for everyone. They're clearly saying, making clear that we are everybody else. These rights should have been ours at the beginning. And they're putting themselves with the rest of the community. I mean, to make a t-shirt this is how much it meant. Aside, and I want to pay tribute to, and I may have skipped, I did skip a slide. These are in the collection in our repository, documenting the groups that fought for this. Equality Maine, Maine Won't Discriminate, Referendum 6, the Maine Civil Rights March and Rally. This march was sparked because of the referendum that overturned one of the non-discrimination bills. Mainers United for Marriage Archives. It took us so long to get the civil rights. Marriage went a little bit quicker. Equal Protection Portland, South Portland Citizen, Justin Westbrook Citizen. When they couldn't get a statewide bill, I think many people said, screw it. And local communities said, we're going to get a local ordinance that ensures non-discrimination in our town. And so Equal Protection Portland, they get the ordinance passed in 1992. Lewiston Auburn gets it passed in 1993. Unfortunately, it gets overturned largely due to the Catholic Church. South Portland gets it in 98, and Westbrook in 2002. I want to show one more. This is the T-shirt that was created by South Portland Citizens for Justice. I love the name of this group. And when I first saw this T-shirt, what hit me was, wow. You can look at that. That is a very well-designed graphic. So there's one or two things, or both happened. Either they had a member of the group who was a graphic designer and donated their services, or they had enough money to hire somebody to create that graphic design. Either way, what this T-shirt alone tells me is not just that South Portland was working on a local ordinance and there were enough people there who thought this was important, but that group was made up of that group was well resourced. Also in this collection, there's a banner and there's a very well put together press packet, which also tells me that, again, either they had the money to hire a political consultant to tell them how to make a press packet, or somebody on that committee did that for a living and put the press packet together for them. This is why artifacts are so important. You can pull information from them. Material culture carries its history with it. So, good. My timing is good. I'm so proud of myself. So we end with the question, what is the importance of preserving primary resources? And I'm going to open it up to the audience. Thoughts? I'll answer for you.
Well, you have original documents or publications, pick photos that haven't been monkeyed with.
Exactly, monkey with, they haven't been interpreted. And that's important, and so that's why they're valuable. They are the documents. It's not somebody's interpretation. But why is it then? So it's important to preserve them so that you can then write the story, because you just can't make this stuff up, or at least you should. Well, some people make stuff up. Yeah.
Well, in terms and symbols change over time. So when you're talking about the game Monopoly, I heard you talking about the teddy bear, that originally it might have meant something referring to femininity, but I immediately thought, well, the bears and the furries.
Yes.
So I didn't know if that had changed
Yes.
over time. So having the original resources then traces those symbols throughout time.
One of the things that thank you, beautiful interpretation. One of the interesting things is we bring out the game Monopoly with young people and they flip. But I asked them, well, do these images make sense to you? And they go, no, because the images are actually images of the gay community as it existed in 1983, and particularly in California where it was created. Those images are not, and I've actually said to student groups, stereotypes that don't even, what would you do? And they would do it completely differently. There would be different pieces. They would say, one of them I said, well, I'd have cards for I'd have, instead of the spaces being the streets of gay neighborhoods across I'd have it for just different GFTAs across Maine. The other, so I think it's right. It's they're the uninterpreted. So you can write history with them, but you need to keep those original resources so that, as you pointed out, things change over time, but also they can be reinterpreted over time as a new generation tells the story, or to tell different parts of the story. So here I'm going to tell. When I got here in 1999, I started gathering collections. One of the first collections I went to pick up was from a guy named Albert Nickerson. Albert Nickerson had a florist store in Portland. When I went to pick up his stuff, he said, well, how much do you know about the history? And I said, really, I just got here. I don't know anything. He said, let me tell you what the history was. He said, so basically, The gays, the men, they're just fucking around, excuse my language, but this is what he said. They're just fucking around, they're, fooling around, and AIDS hits. And the women, they put down their what they were working on, and they started working on AIDS. So when Albert told me that story, I always thought what he meant was that the women were organizing for ERA. But actually, over time, I realized, no, that's probably not what he meant, because ERA happened much earlier. What he meant now, I think, is that the women were organizing. What he's talking about is the women were creating the Maine Lesbian Gay Political Alliance, because that's happening in '84. The AIDS epidemic doesn't hit till a little later. So when the AIDS epidemic hit, what he was saying is that the women had already been organizing for the civil rights bill, and then they turned their attention to AIDS. And in fact, what I now know does happen is that AIDS becomes the second quiver. It's taken by those who are working towards the legislation for non-discrimination. They're saying this is not another reason why we got to get this through, because people suffering this terrible disease need to have the rights. They need to not be thrown out of their apartments because they have AIDS, or thrown out of their jobs because they have AIDS. And in fact, I didn't see that at first, and nobody's actually written a really extensive history on the LGBT community in Maine, but I don't know if that's the right interpretation, but in order to do it, people are going to need the primary sources to go back to. I'm actually going to be contacting the Women and Gender Studies department that has internships, and say, if you've got an intern interested and wants a topic about queer history, I suggest they look at our records to see the role of women, i.e. lesbians, in the civil rights movement. Because I think, and the reason I think this is important is because I heard this story from several different donors, including a guy named Steve Garrity, who worked very hard. He was part of Maine Won't Discriminate. And when I asked him, would you agree with this? He kind of yeah, that's kind of right. And I think he didn't like the fact that it was recognizing the lesbians and having had a leading role in the civil rights movement. I don't know for sure. Somebody needs to do the study. But there are so many different stories that can be told. You got to keep the primary sources so that those different stories, not just the civil rights, but there are all sorts of other stories. Finally, the LGBT collection is at USM on the Portland campus. Right now, we're only open by appointment only. Contact my colleague Jill. We have a web page and a digital comments. And I thank you. Are there questions, comments, funny stories?
What happens to the continuity of collections like this when it's switched from paper to internet? Do they stop, or is there still a curation process for the?
I'm not quite sure you mean what you mean.
Well, like Equality Maine, the sort of the history of that organization was on paper for a long time, and now it's probably all on Google Drive somewhere.
Right.
So does that collection stop when that happens?
No, we collect electronic records, and now we have born digital collections. I will show you one. This entire collection, Beatles Lunch, is an oral history. It doesn't exist on paper. All it is a recording. It's only a audio recording, born digital, never existed any other way. Another one, and this is a huge collection, and it is, I would say those newspapers are one of, as one group of materials, one of the most important in the collection. I would say the other is the Querying the Task. This is a massive oral history project by Wendy Chakas, a sociology professor at USF, who has, working with students, has photographed and then interviewed all these people. None of this is on paper. This is only digital recordings. And for any one of these, you can download the transcript and download the interview itself and listen to it. And you can listen to it online. These are fabulous because oral histories are great resources. The problem is they're really labor intensive because you have to do the oral, you have to prepare for the oral history, you have to do it, and then you have to create the transcript. But the great thing is they capture lots of history that never made it down onto paper or in an artifact. It's what people, what people experience in the gay bars, which were important for the gay community. It was the only place, it was often the place where newspapers were handed out. Gay bars were really important. Problem, of course, with more digital collections is we know how to preserve paper fairly well, but preserving digital files is a whole new and difficult process.
I'd like to say something about Charlie Howard.
Please.
One of the names that people call me is the fact checker, fact, F-A-C-T. So anyways, Charlie was in the center of downtown Bangor. He was walking across the Condescate Stream Bridge. That he didn't get thrown into the river, he got thrown into the stream, right, whatever I just said. And he was a young man. I don't know whether he was in his late teens, early 20s, but he was very young for that to happen.
And we have next to nothing on him because this happened back in '84. The
Right.
collection didn't exist yet. And he's somebody nobody cared about. So nobody saved his papers.
Right.
We do have, however, the film of the memorial that was put up in Bangor. And I don't know where that is. Sorry. You know, it used to be that I knew every collection and every detail about the department, and now it's so big that I just don't know everything anymore. Yeah, I'm not going to waste my time.
You don't have to be a USM student to.
No, the
access.
collections are open, all special collections is open to anybody. All you have to do is have a photo ID to register with us. Why do you have to have a photo ID? Because if you steal something from me, I need a photo ID to start a skip trace on you. And it is standard policy for any special collections. Another, I mentioned that in Lewiston, Auburn, back too far. They also passed a local ordinance that was then overturned largely due to the Catholic Church. And there are one of the things you have to know, primary resources, they may be uninterpreted, but you have to also very, very carefully consider how it was created, because I'm going to show you this in another photo. This is in Lewiston, Auburn, at hearings about a non-discrimination local ordinance. And this is the side that's against it. They're calling it special rights. I don't understand how you can call basic civil rights that everybody else has as special rights. But that was the argument. But I think Annette Dragon taking this photograph was making a very strong point. She is portraying these people as being aggressive, and loud. And the accompanying photograph is the other side, and it's the juxtaposition. She actually created a exhibit of her photographs and then gave us the exhibit. Is this photograph of this single man quietly standing there. Remember, the Catholic Church is behind this, so he is using a principle from the Catholic Church, and he's just quietly saying, love thy neighbor. Think about that. I think that was a brilliant piece of documentation on Annette Dragon's part. The photographs are fun to look through. And
Go back to your first images, first page there. And the older woman that's in the center. Franny
that's-
Peabody,
yeah.
she was a mover and a shaker
do you know how she got involved?
because her grandson had died of AIDS. She was she is a huge deal of where Portland is today.
Yeah, because she was wealthy, she had connections. Aside when Franny Peabody died and her papers were being given, they were spread between several different organizations. We got the part of her papers that had to do with the LGBT community. Part of her papers, I believe, went to Maine Historical, that had to do more with her work in cultural institutions and landmarks. She had, I think one of the reasons that she's able to make a difference is she has these connections that she can bring to the battle.
And she was open to speak to everybody.
Yes,
Have you been able to acquire any of the papers or documents related to this young transgender woman becoming Nicole? I just
no,
recently read that book and it's a fascinating
it is,
story, and her family lived in Bangor.
right, and then her family,
Orono, I guess. and then
their
they
family
moved to
had to
Portland.
leave, and they came down to live in Portland.
Yes.
And aside, one of the other parts of, which I haven't shown you, aside from collecting, providing access and preserving artifacts, part of the mission of the Sampson Center and the LGBTQ collection is outreach. It's to both empower the community and to educate. And so I just have to figure out how to get to it. I have to go all the way back to. We have events, several events a year, and we started filming these. And the reason we film them and then put them up on the digital commons, I can do a program. We were actually the first ones in Maine to do a program on transgender in schools. I can do a live program in Portland, but I can't expect somebody from Caribou to come down to watch it. But if I take that program and I put it up online, a class in Caribou can get together, watch it, and then have their own discussion. So I can create a lasting educational resource. And I may not be able, that's me, sorry. We did a panel, I think it's this one, yeah. This guy here, that's Nicole's father. On this panel, we had a lawyer from GLAAD, which is the gay lesbian attorney, legal defense, something like that, sorry. And we had a principal of a school with a transgender teacher, and we had that transgender teacher, the parent of a transgender student, and a trans student. I have talked to him, there's nothing he has, and he works at USM. They have nothing to give us. Or perhaps it's not the right time, but he knows of the collection. So if they ever do, hopefully we will, get those. But these programs are wonderful. Actually, my favorite one is one called the Transgender Revolution. And we have a panelist who, a trans man, a trans woman, a cross-dresser, and I can't remember the other. And at one point in the program, and they all tell their coming out stories that just grab your heart. One of them, a trans woman, she came from a military family, with going back to her great grandfather. They had all served in the military, and she had like 3 brothers who are all, and when she came out to her family, to her father and brothers, she was scared. And she told them, and they accepted her and supported her. And she chose her new name to preserve the name that she was given, which was honoring her grandfather. She wanted to put that in her. The funniest part, I mean, the program, the Trans Revolution program, makes me cry because of the coming out, but it also makes me laugh because at one point, the trans man says, kind of looks out of the audience and says, you know, we got to choose our names, did you? And the audience is silent for a second, not quite sure, and then everyone realizes at once, and everybody starts laughing. And it was such a marvelous moment of, I got more going for me than you do. Any other questions or comments?
Mary Kay, got any questions?
I have a couple things.
Oh, sorry,
to share.
I forgot.
So, the question about why our primary source is important, Brenda had to add, yes, our responses to the artifacts, so like you had mentioned, interpretation, are a news story of our time. And then Eleanor had a few comments, memories really. Albert, who you mentioned the story about Albert, is exactly right. But most gay men were not as aware of the work of women in the community. And then she said, that was David Garrity.
Sorry, she's right, yes, David Nuts.
And he was not really here at the time, though he came as soon as the first AIDS patient was diagnosed. And then the last comment from Eleanor about Charlie was that he was 23 when he was killed.
This is that map showing people using, the map shows what's being used on that page. So we're up at a higher level, so there's more stuff. The last president of USM, I spoke at an alumni event, and I showed this, and the president loved it because it was showing people across the world using USM's resources. And there'll be time, you read it long enough. I mean, we've got Africa, we've got at least 3 continents right now. But sometimes the whole screen will light up. Well, thank you so much for having me today. And if you'd like, I have brought brochures with me. We have a flyer that you can take a picture of, and it'll take you to the webpage or the digital commons. And if you have material or know somebody, please get in touch with me. The only reason that the collection is as large and as thorough is because the community has been so responsive and so eager to have this storage saved. Without them, we couldn't have done it. Thank you.
You ended. Did you say the president of USM was real happy?
He loved that map.
Are you talking about Glenn Cummings?
Yes.
He's from Bath. He grew up in
Oh,
Bath.
did he? I didn't know that.
Yes, yes.
He,
One of Bath's success stories.
he just loved it.
Yeah.
Can I close this or should I?